Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and today it's my pleasure to have Brian Miller with us. Brian is a magician turned author and speaker on human connection. He works with organizations who believe everyone deserves to feel heard, understood, and valued. He also helps thought leaders get TED ready in his high-level speaking program, Conquer the Red Dot. Brian, it's so great to have you on the show.
Stephan, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, me too. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I came about you just through, some random, maybe non-random, more synchronistic events of just, trolling around on YouTube looking for interesting things to learn about, such as the Riverside platform, which you've posted about on YouTube. So I'm curious to hear what is your YouTube specific strategy? How does it differ from your podcast strategy? Because I see them as two different things.
Oh yeah, I think one of the worst things you can do if you run a podcast is just to post your podcast on YouTube.
Mm.
I think that's it's not what YouTube is meant for. It's just like anything else in the world is taking a look at what is this medium and how are people engaging with this medium. Now, I am no YouTube expert. I am a much better podcaster than I am a YouTuber. But I can tell you that what YouTube does not like is long form conversations unless you are already famous, right? Now, 10 years ago, you could build a long form YouTube channel, and some of the people still doing it are the legacy people who were doing it before YouTube had whatever it is, 40 million accounts on there. But these days for YouTube, this current season of my podcast, I'm only posting 8 to 10 minute clips, a kind of a complete thought from an hour-long conversation on my podcast. I'm putting that video on YouTube and linking people to the audio for the full podcast. And that's I'm just doing it just two different ways. And then creating micro content from there for the other socials.
Gotcha. That's cool. And so, what sort of engaging do you do in other channels to get your audience to feel like they're part of a tribe and part of a movement? Like, how do you galvanize this audience so they're not just passively consuming content and then moving on to the next thing?
I it's a good question. It's kind of the $1 million question, isn't it? When you're in podcasting or anything like this. I mean, podcasting is a very difficult platform because it's audio. It doesn't lend itself to the social medias, which are predominantly visual mediums. What I try to do is actually engage with people not directly with the podcast itself. I chat with people, I engage in the comments, I post stuff around the ideas that I talk about on the podcast, and I mention the podcast once in a while, but I don't push people over to listen to the podcast. And for me, part of it is that my podcast isn't monetized. It's not part of my income strategy. It's actually the only thing in my entire life that isn't monetized. No ads. I don't promote my own services on there. I just have conversations that I believe are worth having. And so for me, my goal having a conversation is simply to make it an awesome conversation for the guest that I approach it with a, if you knew zero people but the two of us were ever going to hear this, would it still be worth your time? And if the answer is yes, I'm thrilled. And then anything else is gravy. And it has grown on its own and gone out there and done what it needed to do from there.
Right, right. And so,
Yeah.
if you were to give a one piece of advice to somebody who wants to start either podcasting or becoming a YouTuber, having their own channel, and creating their own tribe, what would it be? What would be the one thing that if that is done, either everything else becomes easier or not even relevant?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll pull from my whole, like, I have like two careers, one as a speaker and one as a coach, as you had mentioned, coaching TED speakers, TEDx speakers, leaders on TED style talks, things like that. The key to a TEDx talk or TED style talk is the idea worth spreading. It's, can you state in one sentence what your big idea is, who it's for, and why it matters? Can you do it in a tweet? And almost nobody can, which is why TEDx accepts less than 1% of all applications. And for context, Harvard accepts 5% of all applications. Just to set that aside. So what I tell everybody is this is not just for TED Talks. The reason TED has become such a popular platform, among other things, is that there's an unbelievable clarity in being able to explain an idea in just 10 minutes or 12 minutes. It used to be 18, now it's 10 or 12. And every single TEDx application, the first question is state your idea worth spreading in one sentence. Almost no one can do it. So what I tell people is this is not just for TED. You want to run a podcast, you want to run a YouTube channel, you want to build a tribe, quote unquote. You need to be able to state what you do or what you believe in, who it's for, and why it matters in one sentence. If you can do that, lead with that. All your content, everything should serve that. Like write that sentence, that perfect sentence on a post-it note or on your whiteboard or on your computer background. And every time you're thinking about making a LinkedIn post or an Instagram post or whatever, or a podcast episode, ask yourself, does this thing I'm thinking about creating and posting, does it immediately and obviously support the idea worth spreading of my show or my business or whatever? If not, why are you wasting people's time? There's too much information. There's too much noise. Don't add to the noise. Only post something if it immediately and obviously supports your big idea. And so in that way, this idea becomes a North Star for you. And because you're so clear on it and you lead with that and all your content follows that, people very quickly, they get it. They get what you're about. And it's why, Stephan, people like you can find me because of an audio tutorial training I made and go down the rabbit hole into my actual profession as a speaker and a podcaster on human connection, all this stuff. Because even when I do audio tutorials as a side hustle for fun on YouTube, my big idea worth spreading about human connection and creating a world where everybody feels heard, understood, and valued, it's even there in my audio trainings. And that's how
Mhm.
people like you end up coming to me and going, I don't even know how we first met, but somehow I ended up discovering your work. It's always because of the consistency of my big idea. So that's my like one piece of advice for people.
Oh, that's cool. And what is the exact sentence that is your one sentence?
Yeah. So for me, and you might have a different sentence for each business or for each service or things like that, right? So you can find catchphrases to distill it down. So like the umbrella around all of my work is simply the sentence, everyone deserves to feel heard, understood, and valued.
Mm.
Now, that's not as actionable. That's kind of a catchphrasey way of saying it. When it comes to my speaking and consulting career on human connection, it's, I work with organizations, educators, and healthcare facilities who believe everyone deserves to feel heard, understood, and valued in order to attract world-class talent and generate sustainable repeat business, right? It's like something like that, depending on the industry, is the full sentence where you get what you do, who it's for, and why it matters very clearly.
Yeah, gotcha. So my statement or North Star, I'm not even sure if this is really a, uh, I don't know if it fits your criteria, but it's how I govern my life. And it's just simply this, that if I'm about to either go on stage or get on a mic or I don't know, just jump on a Zoom call with a client or a prospect, anything where I'm going to interact with people. I always think ahead of time, what is this opportunity going to? How is this opportunity going to reveal light? How am I going to reveal light? So
Yeah.
my sentence, I guess, would
Yeah.
be reveal light in absolutely everything I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And you can get, so when I'm working with somebody on this, we get more specific. So let's do it in real time. This is fun. So
Okay.
let's start with this. There's a really simple formula. And this is like when people end up working with me one-on-one, it's not like I'm keeping the secrets for when they book me one-on-one. It's just that we do it together. All the secrets are out there. There's no secrets. So here's the formula. The formula is to action so that outcome. This is a stupid simple formula. but it's incredibly powerful because it gets you to focus on two of the three components that we were talking about earlier. It leaves out the who. So the who we can always, that's easy because you can figure out if you know who specifically you're talking to, you add the who into there, like educators or healthcare facilities, whatever it is what I'm doing. But to action, so that outcome. So your action was to reveal light. Go ahead, finish that.
Yeah. Well, to reveal light so that uh, the entire um, collective conscious of humanity is raised.
Sure, something like that. So that would be like a 20,000-foot view, kind of the general view of it. And then if you were actually doing that sentence in a way that made it feel personable to an individual, then you would work on your outcome in a way that essentially you need to be able to say to an individual person, how does their life improve as a result of colliding with you and your big idea?
Hmm.
And that's how you would do the outcome. So yeah, so that's
So
my
maybe
number
another
one piece of
version of
advice.
that would be to reveal light so that the person feels loved unconditionally.
Beautiful, beautiful, right? To reveal light so that, you feel loved unconditionally, or so that, someone in your life, everyone in your life feels loved unconditionally, something like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, the action is what you want someone to do as a result of colliding with you and your big idea. The outcome is how does their life improve or get better as a result of colliding. And I use the word colliding on purpose. I really think, just like how you said at the beginning of this, that maybe it was random, maybe everything's random or nothing's random or whatever it is, right? It's
Right.
like the way people tend to have their lives changed by someone else or someone else's content. I feel like it's always a collision. It always feels like this moment where you smash face first into a person or an idea you've never heard of before. And because, just like if you crash into a wall riding a bike, you, something has to change as a result of the collision. And some
Hmm.
people go running away. They hide. They want to pretend it never happened. And so but that's a decision. That's a big change now because they've encountered something and they decided not to pursue it. Or they smash into it and they go, okay, I'm going to follow this through and see what happens. So that moment of collision, I think, is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that term collision. And it also, what you were telling me about these collisions being their opportunities to go down a different pathway, or I don't know. It just made me think of this term I learned last year called shufflemancy, which is kind of a strange word,
Mm.
but
What's that?
it also correlates to another term that I learned last year called bibliomancy. So I first learned about bibliomancy in an interview like this, but with Yannick Silver. I don't know if you know him, but he's amazing. He's the founder of Maverick, the mastermind, and
Oh,
big
cool.
internet marketer, really successful. So his interview on the show was really fascinating. And we talked about this concept where you can open up a book with intention, of course. You open up a book and it is exactly what you needed to read at that moment, right? So you ever have that happen to you where
Oh,
you
yeah.
feel
Yeah.
drawn to pull a book out of the shelf or to pick up a book at the bookstore or whatever, and
Yeah.
you just randomly, either nothing's random or everything's random, right? You randomly open it up and find that that is exactly the thing you needed to read at that moment. Yeah. So that's bibliomancy. Can you think of a
Cool.
moment where that happened to you recently?
Yeah, I don't know how. Actually, yes, I can. It happened literally just the other day. I finally started reading a book I'd been meaning to read for years, which is a book called Magic is Dead, by Ian Frisch. And my background is as a full-time magician of 10 years, and I don't do much of it anymore. But once a magician, always a magician. That never leaves you. And I've been meaning to read this book, and I was like some 20 or 30 pages. Good, but it was a journalist writing it about the world of magic he dove into for like 2 years and went undercover and all this stuff. And then I'm like 20 or 30 pages into it, and there was a passage where he described the moment he stopped simply investigating this story and fell down the rabbit hole of magic, and he described it, and it literally brought me to tears because it brought me back to before I was a professional magician, before it was just this normal part of my life, back when I was a kid and a teenager, falling into magic and discovering my love of magic for the first time before it became a job and something I had to do and all the things that come along with that. And it like literally in moments, it rekindled my love of magic and just reminded me why that art form was something I dedicated my life to and made me want to do more of it again.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yeah, you can have these magic moments come just simply from the intention of connect me to my bigger purpose or connect me to more of who I am, my higher self, my yeah, more of a higher view of this reality and my experience of it. Like I had this time of really profound meaning for me where I was just simply driving. My wife and little son were asleep in the car. It was a long drive from Orlando to Miami. We live in Miami, and I couldn't play music because or podcasts because that would have woken them up. So I was just there with my thoughts, and I was thinking about how when I went to 40 Years of Zen, it's the neurofeedback program. It's a week long, put on by Dave Asprey's team, and it had unlocked memories from my childhood, some really beautiful, positive memories, and I just decided to ask for more. So I prayed and asked for more of those memories without having to go through a week long intensive program, and they just flooded through. It's just
That's
amazing, right? So
awesome.
you just have this thought, and then you turn it into a request, and with intention and with the uh, understanding that there's more to this physical reality than just what meets the eye.
Mm.
You can tap into some really beautiful stuff over there on the other side of the veil. So, anyways, uh,
Yeah.
that's related to what we've been talking about. But then there's I wanted to share with you this term shufflemancy and how that relates to bibliomancy, and that is simply when you are online or you are just getting bombarded with seemingly random uh, things, recommendations, featured whatevers, right? Videos or quotes or whatever. It's exactly the thing that you are needing at that moment is what's presented right
Mm.
to you. And it could be in the form of what's featured on the homepage. Like I went to
Mm.
edgarcasey.org uh, last year. It's like March, April, and there was exactly the webinar that I needed to attend, and it just kind of popped off the screen
Mm.
for me. It was taught by Karen Noe, who was a guest on this podcast. It was on how to receive messages from angels and departed loved ones. I'm like, I got to attend that.
Mm.
And it was life changing. Attending that
Wow.
webinar was life changing. And there were a whole bunch of other featured things on that homepage, but that was the one that was the shufflemancy that I needed to see. A lot of times I'll go to the YouTube
Huh.
homepage or my Facebook feed, and there's something there that just pops off the screen for me. And I know that that's meant for me. And so it's not that dissimilar from opening a book randomly with intention, and boom, there's the thing that you need to see that's going to move your life and your mission forward. That happens online too. It happens everywhere. Even in an event, you go to an event and you can only
Yeah.
attend part of it,
That's
and
cool.
boom, that's the talk or that is the nugget that you needed to hear at that entire event.
Yeah, yeah. Or you miss a part of a talk and end up having a conversation in the hallway that changes your life instead. Which
Exactly.
which which
Yeah.
I feel like is part of what we've been missing in the last 2 years. Where virtual, it's the one major thing missing from virtual events is the in between the stuff. I mean, I'm sure like you have, I've spoken at some 200 virtual events since March of 2020, and I love them actually. I love the virtual space. There's lots of cool stuff about it. But the big missing thing is the in-betweenness, the randomness of it all. The chance for synchronicity is just gone because you're not gonna bump into somebody because you had to run to the bathroom real quick and then you didn't want to open the door because you were afraid it would squeak while somebody was, so you stayed out in the hallway for a second to wait for it to be louder in there so no one would notice you, and then you have a conversation with someone you never would have talked to, and blah blah blah. Yeah, yeah, That's cool. I
Yeah.
love that idea of the Shufflemancy could actually apply to the real world as those things are starting to come back too.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just
Yeah.
at Genius Network annual event. That's Joe Polish's organization, and I'm a part of it. It's a beautiful group of people. I spoke at the event as well. So what an amazing group of people, what a tribe. And it was wonderful to be able to reconnect with them in person. And yeah, I do miss that. So I haven't done a lot of in-person
Yeah.
speeches, but that was one just last week.
Great. No, that's awesome. I got off a call with someone this morning who I think I'm going to end up doing an in-person speech for in just like 2 weeks from now. They used to book out 10 months in advance, 15 months in advance. Now it's like 2 weeks because nobody knows what's coming next. Can you be in New York in 13 days and keynote this conference? I'm like, I'm getting excited to be in the real world with people and have that happen again. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So if we were to go back to your formula of to action so that outcome, I wonder if the outcome is actually to reveal light in everything I do is, or that you do, if I'm directing that to someone else as an inspiration for them to action. Maybe that's the outcome and not the action. And then the action is just around making choices or being mindful or having intention. So have intention in everything you do so that you reveal light in uh, every place you go. I
Big
don't know.
okay, so what you just did, it's so exciting to me what you just did because that sometimes takes some of my clients 2 or 3 full hour-long sessions before they have the revelation you just had in real time, which is so many times when I start working with someone, the thing that they think is the action of what they do or their talk they're trying to give actually is the outcome, and that's why they've been having trouble up until this point in many cases getting that idea to spread is because they're skipping steps. They're thinking the outcome, right? They're the thing that's actually the outcome. They're trying to do it first. They're trying to say reveal light everywhere, right? And it's like, wait, no, actually that we can't do that first. We got to take a step back. We got to get someone to change the way that they engage before light is revealed. And that's a huge moment for a lot of people when they realize that that's why maybe certain things in their business or their copy on their website or the talk they're trying to give or the ideas they can't sell to their boss aren't working. Not to say that you're not working, obviously you are, but that this happens a lot where the action is really the outcome. So that was very cool. That was very cool to see you do that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about this whole magic side of you and how you bring this forward in everyday interactions and of course keynote speeches and in YouTube videos and podcast episodes, but also just in your everyday life because life is magical. Like we are magicians, and this experience of life is so magical. You get all sorts, like the more you open yourself up to receiving the magic, the more shows up for you. Like angel numbers just show up dozens of times in a week for me, and like lots of things that someone would think are I don't know, maybe a little out there or unusual, become more everyday occurrences. And another thing too is the more benevolent you are, the more the synchronicities show up. So you keep working on being pure of mind, and deed, and then you get this new level of synchronicities, and it keeps just escalating. This is really cool. So I'm curious to hear more about the whole magician side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of the magic of like everyday interactions, like that's what all this is for. I mean, I have a career speaking about this stuff, not because I think that we should be doing this on in keynote stages, but because I'm trying to get people to do this in their lives. That's what it's for, right? Is the I mean, the subtitle of my book is "Make the Most of Your Daily Interactions and Stop Missing Amazing Opportunities." That's what this is all for. And so, like you said, there's magic everywhere. Now, the thing is, most people don't realize all of the magic that's around them, and because it comes in the form of conversations with strangers. So much of the magic in the world is in conversations with people they're not willing to talk to. And
Mm.
and I get it. I'm busy, you're busy, we're standing in line for coffee and we just want to get our damn latte and get out of there because we got a meeting that matters later, and we're thinking about that fight we had with our mom last week or whatever it is, right? Or planning a fight we're gonna have with somebody later, which I feel like humans do way more than we should, like planning out arguments in advance, which when you think of it is part of the problem. Um, and so what we don't do is we don't take that step to actually attempt a meaningful connection with a stranger, or even with a colleague or coworker or someone that's not really close but someone you see on a regular basis. The big problem for me is that we treat most of our interactions as transactions. This is the real problem.
Mm.
It's not that we don't have enough time, because I think a lot of people think I don't have enough time. I'd love to connect with more people, but who's got the time? Well, you can make a meaningful connection in 8 seconds if you really want to. It doesn't have to take 40 years. It can. It's a
Mm.
different kind of connection. It's a deeper kind of connection, probably. Although there's, sometimes you get people who've known each other for 20 years and they're not that much more connected than someone who, people who met an hour ago. It just depends on your intention in the relationship. And so the key for me is to get away from these interactions as transactions and start recognizing every single person's individual humanity for what it is, and
Yeah.
to be able to look people in the eye and say, without saying a word, to be able to say, I hear you, I see you, and I'm here for you, even if we don't always agree. And if we did more of that, um, a lot of things would be better.
Yeah. Some cultures, that's how they greet people is "I see you." Right? Wasn't that in the movie
Savannah.
Avatar?
Yeah, yeah,
It's "I
and
see you."
a dear friend and a client of mine, and someone who's also been on my podcast, Gertrude Mache. She's originally from
Oh
Zimbabwe,
yeah,
but
yeah.
she's
I
yeah,
know. I'm
she's
friends
she's
with her too.
she's lovely. Gertrude, she's an incredible woman. She's from Zimbabwe. She lives in New Zealand. I worked with her on her third TEDx talk or something. She's given a bunch of them. But she's an
Mm.
incredible woman. And when we spoke on my podcast, she said so many things that I've found myself quoting over and over and over again for years since we did that one podcast interview. And she talks about the languages built in their native language in Zimbabwe. It was built into it. It was I see you. And she said that there's a call and response built into their language, where in the morning you say, how are you? And the response is, I woke up well if you woke up well. Now think about that.
Mm.
I woke up well if you woke up well. And when she said that to me, it blew my brain open, because you would never think of that in Western culture or in English or in anything. But the point of that expression was, if you're not okay, I'm not okay, right? All of us are stronger than any of us. We're all in this together. And so if you can approach every person you meet and interact with that sense, I'm not okay if you're not okay. So let's make sure we're all okay. I think that it really changes the tone, and it changes your willingness to have conversations with strangers if that becomes part of your mission, to do that for other people, to
Yeah.
give the gift of human connection in a world that is so lonely and so isolated.
Mm. Yeah. Well, Gertrude was on this podcast, and I
Great.
will include in the
That's so
show
awesome.
notes the link to that. Yeah. Yeah. She's amazing, and I just might add a couple of points to what you were saying about this concept of if you're not okay, I'm not okay. I would be cautious about that stance because we are all okay. We're all just as Ram Dass said, walking each other home, right? And so
Mm,
if truly we are all okay, we're all divine, we're all made from the same divine spark, we're all interconnected, we're all one, then we're never not okay. Even though it might seem like we're not okay at the moment, we haven't zoomed out far enough to see the bigger picture to know that we really are okay. And if we modify the statement to something more along the lines of, you're okay, I'm okay, and you're okay, or I'm enough and you're enough, or whichever order you prefer. I just think that that kind of not even confidence, but knowingness is contagious.
Yeah, maybe. I have a real visceral, like a real gut disagreement with that though.
Okay, tell me more
I
about that.
totally hear what you're saying. Like I get where that's coming from. I guess there might be a place that you and I are meeting in the middle, or trying to say the same thing in different ways, which is, to me it would feel very presumptuous, bordering on arrogant, to say to somebody else, no, really, like, you're okay. Like, you don't
Mm,
know their circumstances, their perspective, their conditions, their mental state, their experiences. It's
yeah.
my wife is a therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist. She works mostly with kids in at-risk families, and one of the things that they learn in therapy, this is fundamental to being a therapist, is you can never truly understand the perspective of another person, period. Which is why
Hmm.
therapists don't give
Hmm.
advice, contrary to popular belief. They don't. That's not part of what therapy is. And whereas, like, life coaches give advice, right? There's a big difference. Not saying one's better than the I am saying one's better than the other, but not different places, right? Different things for different people, whatever, right? But not saying all
Right.
life
Yeah.
coaches are bad, saying it's a different thing, but there's a distinguishing factor there. And you don't give advice because advice is presumptuous. Advice assumes that you know better than somebody else does about their own circumstances. And so I guess where you and I might
Mm,
meet in the middle on this idea is that if your belief is that we are all okay, we just need to zoom out far enough to see it, and that maybe I would approach interactions as a way of trying to ask somebody questions, or let them open up in a way that lets them realize for themselves that they're more okay than they thought they were. Let them be the facilitator for them to find that for themselves, is maybe how I would approach what you're saying.
gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So I hear what you're saying, and I certainly don't want anyone to feel not heard, or uh, that I come from a place of arrogance. So that's good feedback. And one thing I've taken on very seriously, I heard from Ephraim Olszewski, who is also is a friend, but also past guest on this podcast, is that you need to climb this invisible wall of context that separates you from the other person, get over on the other side into their world, see from their vantage points, walk in their shoes. And it only counts if they feel gotten by you, not that you get
Yes.
them, but that they
Yes.
feel gotten. And as long as you do that, then you have rapport and relatedness and the connection, right? So then you can have a true conversation, really communicate. So
Yeah. Eh, yeah.
definitely that is important. And if the way that you model in your interactions with people is that I'm okay and you're okay, even if you're not feeling okay, not dismissing your feelings, not
Mhm.
invalidating your world, but also coming from a place of certainty beyond logic, to quote a concept from Kabbalah, then that is also contagious, I think. So
Mm.
maybe that is a
No,
meeting in the
I'm
middle.
totally
Maybe
with you,
maybe not
and
quite.
yeah, no, I'm totally with you on the invisible ladder or wall of context, whatever the way you
Yeah.
said your friend expresses it. I this is a huge part of my work, is, and I talk about it in a more academic sense. That's a very poetic way to talk about it, which I love. But my background is academic philosophy. I abandoned a PhD in philosophy of language to do card tricks for a living, which was a rough phone call home. Um, but I it worked out 17 years later. Here we are. But nonetheless, so the technical term in psychology for what you're describing there is perspective taking. Perspective taking. It's the ability to see the world from the
Right.
point of view of another person. But critically, the phrase perspective taking is kind of a misnomer. It makes people think that you should be taking on somebody else's perspective. Problem is, as we keep discussing, you actually can't can't figure out their perspective. Like, the first thing people try to do when this happens is they try to imagine, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Imagine what it would be like to be this person. That's a super useful exercise. It's a creative exercise. It's a good empathic. I hate empathetic, because it has the word pathetic in it. And it's a good empathic exercise. But the problem is we almost always guess wrong. And there's a ton of science and a ton of studies that show us this. We are embarrassingly bad at figuring out the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs of others, even the people we're closest to in the world. Spouse of 40 years, we're a little bit better than perfect strangers, but not as much as you would think, embarrassingly low. And so the question is, if you want to take on someone else's perspective, you want to walk in their shoes, you want to bridge the gap, how do you do it if we're so bad at doing this imagining? And the answer is, you don't guess, you ask. You ask people
Mm.
meaningful and relevant questions. You let them give you their perspective. So instead of perspective taking, it ought to be called perspective giving or perspective getting or something like that. And so I think we're
Yeah.
talking around a lot of the same concepts. This is maybe a more academic way for
Mm.
the people who are kind of more academic minded to think about it. But that's, yeah, it's like what Chris Voss would call tactical empathy. It's empathy, but without the emotion. It's really, perspective taking is just a skill. And that's
Yeah.
exciting to me, though. Like, some people are like, oh, like, you take the emotion out, that's not as good. To me, it's exciting that perspective taking is a skill, because it means it can be learned, honed, practiced, developed, because nobody's born knowing how to do it or with the ability to do it. That to me, that's a good thing. It's a growth commodity.
Yep, yep. Tactical empathy. That's great. I actually interviewed. Well, I just saw Chris in the green room a few days ago. Before and after my speech, he went after me. So
Oh man,
we
how
had a
was
little
he?
chat. Oh, he's fabulous
I
as
love
always. I
Chris.
mean, he's
I had him
yeah.
scheduled to be on my show for like April of 2020, and then the world fell apart and we've never reconnected. I never managed to get him back on after the world changed and shifted. I'd love to have a conversation with him now, 2 years later in the pandemic, to hear some of this stuff. But yeah, he was booked to be on my show, and then the world collapsed.
Well, I can shoot him an email and give him a little nudge to
Yeah.
get back on your show.
In any case, he's awesome.
So he is awesome, and tactical empathy is awesome, and being in their world so that you can not just negotiate, because that's his area of
Right.
expertise and focus, but also so that you can understand them and build a bridge
Yeah.
with the person you're in communication with. The concept of be interested to be interesting,
Yeah.
or I take it even to another level and be fascinated to be fascinating.
Yeah. 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 I love that. And I say all the time, the goal of connection is not agreement. The goal is understanding, right? The goal is understanding. Too many people are and I do it too. It's not like I'm some saint. Like, we're all human. You get so focused on trying to get somebody to agree with you, to make sure your point is being adopted instead of merely understood. And I think that when we start with when understanding isn't just the starting place, but it's the ending place, it's the goal, a lot of really cool things happen if that's the goal. Just to make sure that I truly, fully, and completely understand where you're coming from, why you believe what you believe, why you're doing what you're doing, and you also do that for me.
Yep.
We may never agree, but we can have we can have coffee now. We can hang out. We can have a bite to eat, or we can at least not come to blows. Like,
Yeah.
it's really hard to get angry with someone when you totally get why they're doing what they're doing, even if you don't agree with it.
And to go full circle back to what you were talking about earlier, of to action so that an outcome, that's the outcome, not the action,
Hmm.
right? What you just described. And then the action might be to ask quality questions, open ended, quality, empathic questions, not
Yeah.
apathetic.
Good callback. Good callback. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're actively building a bridge so that the outcome is the state
Yeah.
this outcome that you just described.
That's literally,
Yeah.
you just wrote the idea worth spreading of my TEDx talk that I gave back in 2015, which back then it was one of the top 100 TED or TEDx talks ever given. It was impossible. I could have never planned for or predicted that. 7 years later, there's hundreds of thousands of more talks, but it did 3 million views in a year, and in 2015, that was impossible. It was insane. And the idea worth spreading, the action outcome of my talk that I never stated outright in the talk. I never said this sentence in the talk, but it was what I was working with, was to take on perspectives that are different from our own in order to live in a world where everyone feels understood. That was my talk.
Yeah.
And it
Beautiful.
conquered the world.
Beautiful.
It was nuts.
Yeah. Well, I love exactly the precise way that you conveyed the big idea, and it reminds me also of this tiny little book I read, I don't know, 20 years ago, called "How to Be a People Magnet." And the concept from that book that jumped out at me, I don't think I read the entire book, but I read most of it, and the bibliomancy piece that came out
Yeah.
to me was is called scrambling, and it's doing stuff outside of your comfort zone. Like if you don't have any interest in golf, go play around anyways.
Mm.
If you don't like bowling, uh, go bowl for an evening, and just have something outside of your normal sphere that you can talk with people who are different from you about, and have that's shared experience kind of conversation. Like, oh, you play golf, and you play it every weekend, and you love it, and it's really part of who you are. That's amazing. I've tried it a couple times, and what's your handicap? And so
Mm-hmm.
you can have a, a a conversation again where you're interested,
Yeah.
and then you're interesting as a result, and you're not trying to be interesting. You're just coming from a place of shared experience and curiosity from that place. Yeah.
Yeah. My number, when I get asked for, actual like practical conversation starters or advice for what to ask to, okay, great, meaningful, relevant questions, but what are those? Like, how do I come up with those in the moment? People go blank. My number one favorite go to fallback question, if you just can't think of anything else to ask in a conversation, is what do you love about that? Whatever they just said, what do you
Mm-hmm.
love about that? They say, oh, I was golfing this weekend. I say, oh, you golf? What do you love about golf? There's something beautiful that
Yeah, yeah.
happens when you ask, what do you love about that? And it's it gets them talking about that thing in a way that they may have never talked about it, because they go, what do I love about it? They've never asked themselves. Nobody's ever asked them that. They just do the thing. You're an accountant. What do you love about accounting, being an accountant? And
Mm-hmm.
they go inward and they start to come up with things that sound like values and beliefs. And that's where you connect with people, over values and beliefs. Not And then suddenly you realize that a person that on the surface could not have been more different than you, some job career that's so far different from you. It turns out that they're in it for similar reasons that you do your thing, like, or you find something at the very core fundamental that you actually have in common. That's my favorite question in a conversation. I ask it all the time. And it's hysterical when I give
Yeah.
that advice at a keynote, and then it's all I hear for the rest of a conference for the next 3 days is people wandering around the conference like, "What do you love about that? What do you love about
Yeah. Well, and then they use it on you too. Like, I'm going to use it on you right now.
that?"
What do you love about podcasting that, in a way that it's not monetized? Because I have this podcast that's not
Yeah,
monetized. I'm not pitching my services as an SEO expert every episode, or even every
yeah.
10 or 20 episodes. A lot of people will listen for a while and not even realize what I do for a living,
Mhm.
what my business is. So I would love to hear what you love about that.
Yeah, what I love about running a podcast that is absolutely not monetized in any way is that it's I owe nothing to anybody. In other words, there's no conversations I have to have, there's no topics I have to have. I can completely change course at any given moment. I can stop producing episodes for 6 months with no warning and no apology if I want to. It is mine and mine alone. And it's important for me as a fundamentally creative person to have something in my professional life that is creative purely in the way that I want to be creative, and how whatever that looks like to me in that moment. Because you go further into being self-employed and running a business, and you start to realize that you know how to monetize things, so you start to monetize everything. We get excited. We go, well, I could run ads off of this, and I could promote a service over here. I could make an on-demand course, and I could do this, and it's cool. Yay, we learned how to make money and support our families and take cool vacations. But suddenly, when you're monetized, you owe something to somebody. There's an expectation, and it changes how you engage with the thing when there's an expectation that's external to you. So for me, what I love about my podcast, it is purely for me and the guest. And I care about my audience. I care about the listener, but I care about my guest first. And when you're monetized, you have to care about the listener first. And it's not that that's bad or wrong.
And the sponsor.
And the sponsor, right. Because in other words, you have to care about the listener, because the longer they listen, the better the sponsor does, et cetera, right? That's what I mean is suddenly you're performing a conversation for the sake of somebody else, as opposed to having a conversation. And I want to have conversations. I want, like I said earlier, I want the guest to feel like if you knew 0 people were ever going to hear this but the 2 of us, would it have still been worth an hour of your time? And when you say that to somebody who's a multi-million-dollar CEO, when somebody who's very busy and is giving you an hour to be able to have a conversation that would be worth their time, even if nothing ever came of it, that's really powerful. That's connection.
Yeah. I find that folks I'll talk to in a conversation like this, in a podcast interview, they'll sometimes become clients, and it wasn't an intention or a strategy. It was just me doing my thing.
Yep.
Right. Trying to help and add value and be the change I want to see in the world.
Yeah, they might become clients, they might become friends, they might become collaborators, they might become your biggest cheerleader. Some people who've been on my show have never hired me or booked me directly, but they've recommended my show or my name or my work to dozens of people that do end up going on to hire me. And if I were actually trying to make any of that happen, it wouldn't be happening like that, or it'd be happening very differently, or the conversations would feel different. I just get on to have a chat that makes sense. And you asked me before we started this, what would be a great, what would be a great use of my time in this podcast? And I said, I just want to have a good conversation. I said that before the cameras were rolling. And that's how I feel about my own show too. Yeah.
Yep. Another thing too that happens when you're in these just genuine, heartfelt conversations on a podcast episode is connections start getting made in the person, like the host's mind. Like, oh, I could connect Brian with Peter, for example. That just came to my consciousness. Peter Antonio, or Antonio.
I don't know who that is.
How you pronounce his name. He's amazing. He was on America's Got Talent, and his shtick or whatever was to do mind reading, and it was incredible. He just nailed it with he read the minds of the judges.
Awesome.
Live in front of everybody, and it was astounding. So I had him on the show, and we talked about things like intuition and stuff.
Very cool.
He's got an amazing stage presence about him, and he's really heartfelt and genuine, and just a really nice guy, and trained in magic and things like that as well. I think you guys would hit it off. So if you'd like, I can make a connection.
I'd love it. I love meeting any interesting people, especially people in the weird subset of art forms that is magic and mentalism. We are a special set of geeks.
Yeah. This podcast actually used to be called the Optimized
Really?
Geek, and
hey, there you go.
Changed it because I didn't want to alienate people who didn't identify as geeks.
Right.
I wanted everybody to be able to be part of this tribe and not feel like an outsider.
Great.
Anyways, and there's one story here that I thought I'd share for you and for our listener, because I do also think in terms of how can I change the listener's life.
Absolutely.
While I'm doing the episode. And this is a really cool story I came across just the other day. Another Shufflemancy example. this is, I'm going to read it as if I'm the person, but I'm just literally reading it. I was in Dollar Tree last night, and there was a lady and two kids behind me in the long line. One was a big kid, and the other was a toddler. The bigger one had a pack of glow sticks, and the toddler was screaming for them. The mom opened the pack and gave him one, which stopped his tears. He walked around with it, smiling, but then the bigger boy took it, and the toddler started screaming again. Just as the mom was about to fuss, the older child bent the glow stick and handed it back to the toddler. As we walked outside at the same time, the toddler noticed that the stick was now glowing, and his brother said, I had to break it so that you could get the full effect from it. I almost ran because I could hear God saying to me, I had to break you to show you why I created you. You had to go through it so you could fulfill your purpose. That precious child was happy just swinging that unbroken glow stick around in the air because he didn't understand what it was created to do, which was glow. There are some people who will be content just being, but some of us are chosen. We have to be broken. We have to get sick. We have to lose a job. We have to bury our siblings, parents, best friend, or our child. In those moments of desperation, we were broken. But when the breaking is done, then we will be able to see the reason for which we were created. So when you see us glowing, just know that we have been broken.
Thanks.
And this came to me to share this when you were talking. We were conversing about our little disagreement about whether the person that we're talking with is okay or not okay, right? And of course, zoom out far enough, and we're all okay, but that denies their reality at the moment of feeling completely broken. So I wanted to share that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
So I know we're out of time here, but if our listener wanted to work with you on coaching to give their own amazing TEDx talk, if they wanted to work with you on, it seems like you could do amazing things for their mindset and for them to up level in their business or career. How would they get a hold of you? How would they get you to do a keynote speech, or where should they go?
Yeah, no, thank you. So conquerthereddot.com is the place to start if you're interested in coaching. That's where you can schedule a discovery call and we can talk about what it would look like for you to give a TEDx talk. I'm very discerning with who I work with, so the discovery call is really a way for me to decide if your idea is close enough that we can actually work it into a TEDx talk. And if it's not, I'll tell you what you need to do and send you off, and you can come back at some point when it's closer, because you need to work with people whose ideas are actually potentially on it, could make it to a TEDx stage and then get it there. So conquerthereddot.com. That's also how you would get in touch with me if you were interested in broader coaching. I work with some people not just on TEDx, but to do their TEDx talk and also build a thought leadership platform to get into professional speaking and podcasting and build a career out of what you and I do, thought leadership, whatever that means. That's a term I wish we had a better term for. I hate that term, but it is what it is. Because when someone says at a cocktail party, what do? You can't say I'm a thought leader. Like, we need a better term.
Oh my goodness.
But there's
yes. Results leader would be better than
right.
that.
But yeah, so that's the wider context. That is not listed anywhere on the site. It's something I only offer to people in a conversation where it makes sense to offer it to them. I don't list that program anywhere. And it's full at the moment you and I are talking, but who knows when people are listening to this. So conquerthereddot.com is a good place to start.
Okay, awesome. And then your podcast, if they want to start listening.
beyondnetworkingpodcast.com. The podcast is called Beyond Networking, and all the kinds of cool people that you would enjoy if you listen to Stephan, you would enjoy probably over on my show. Seth Godin and Cal Fussman and all the lovely, the lovely Shema Hyder and Heather Monahan and all the cool people I get to have cool conversations with, just like you do.
That's awesome. Yep, Seth's been on this podcast.
I had a feeling you and I could talk about our mutual
you.
love of Seth, so I avoided mentioning him because I didn't want to go down a rabbit hole.
Oh, fun times. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. Thank you, listener, and get out there and reveal some light and connect with people and make them feel loved. We'll catch you on the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.